There's growing pressure on the government to admit there is a cost of living crisis. Is there? Well, you, our viewers, are telling us that there is. But even if there's an admission from the government, will it fix the issue? Or a tax cut's the answer? National leader Christopher Luxon is with me to discuss more on that. Good morning to you.
Morena, how are you?
Very good. How are you? Because you were 3 days into testing positive for COVID. How are you feeling? And thanks for joining us despite that.
Well, listen, thanks for having me, and thanks for asking. No, I'm actually feeling fine. I've just had a bit of and it doesn't feel much more than a cold, but to be honest, I've just been powering through. I've actually felt really good. So long may it continue. I know it's different for every individual. I've got friends that have been struggling and others that have sort of blasted through pretty easily. But for me, it's been pretty straightforward so far.
The good thing is you've been able to stay home, do some work, and we know you've been watching AM in the meantime, because yesterday in Parliament you raised our interviews with everyday Kiwis, asking the Prime Minister, is there a cost of living crisis? Now, would your tax cuts, if there was a crisis, fix that crisis anyway?
Yeah, well, all we're trying to propose here is, I've said to you from the beginning, we want to be an opposition that opposes the government, but also proposes ideas. So we've got a very simple idea for the budget in May, which is to say, why don't you take some of the money that Grant Robertson's going to add to incremental new spending and give it back in tax relief? And all that's happened is that our tax brackets or our tax thresholds, over time, they become too low and people get caught in higher tax brackets. It's called tax bracket creep. And so all we're doing is saying, hey, listen, why don't we take the tax brackets, adjust them by the level of inflation? That means that New Zealanders actually get to keep some of that money in their pocket.
But how much? Because you spoke about Christine Nation, who we had on the show yesterday, and she said that she can't even afford to get to work to try and get a job. But under the tax cuts, at the very best, their family budget would only increase by $19 a week. And if they're on minimum wage, it would only be $2. I mean, that's certainly not going to cover the petrol, let alone the daycare costs. So tax cuts in this case aren't necessarily going to have much, if even any significant impact on cost of living.
All I'd say to you is that, no one's going to get rich off the back of tax relief or inflation-adjusted tax relief through these tax thresholds. But every little bit does make a difference. And the perverse situation, Melissa, is that, we have average income workers here in New Zealand who actually, are in a 33% tax bracket. You can be a minimum wage worker and you work 4 more extra hours, 44 hours a week, and all of a sudden you're at 30% wage bracket. So it's just a very practical, sensible, common sense thing to do, that our tax thresholds haven't changed for a long time. There's been a lot of inflation. People are getting caught in higher brackets. Why wouldn't we try and work hard to do that?
No one's going to get rich, but those who are at the higher end are still going to get more back per week than those at the lower end. And surely those in the lower and middle incomes are disproportionately affected by this crisis. If you really wanted to ease the cost of living crisis, you would tax more at the higher earners, which would be unpopular with your voters. But presumably why you're not, and correct me if I'm wrong, but not removing the 39% threshold that Labor has introduced.
So what we're saying here is if anyone above $14,000 is going to receive some benefit because the tax thresholds will move up, right?
Yeah, but you're not removing the 39% for the higher earners.
No, what we're saying is just focus on this part of the proposal, which is actually just up tax thresholds very strongly with the
But let's focus on the higher earners. Are you removing the 39%? Because you said in your speech that, you were reversing all of Labor's tax grab, that 39% tax rate betrays the government's attitude to ambition and it's not going to attract top talent to our shores, but you're keeping that. Can we just clarify?
So there's 2 things going on here. What we're saying is there's a proposal for the budget in May, because Grant Robertson's going to go off and spend $6 billion of new money. And we're going to say take a third of that grant and give it back to New Zealanders because they know how to spend it better than you. The second part of the proposal is that when we get to government and in our first term, what we've said is we just reverse the tax grab that Labor's put in place since it's come to power. That will be in the context, obviously, of a full fiscally costed up plan that we'll go to the election with. But, what we're saying is, in principle, we're going to remove the tax, increases that the Labor Party's put in place since they've come to power.
Okay, so not
There's
removing...
two components. The first thing we can do immediately with the cost of living crisis is let's pump up those tax thresholds. They do it in other countries. Many countries just do it automatically, every couple of years.
Yeah, I think people understand that, but I think what is not clear is whether you're going to be giving more money back to higher earners or whether you're going to keep with the Labor policy of the 39%.
All I'd say to you is someone earning $70,000 to $2,000, which is the average, wage in New Zealand here, is going to get about $870 back a year. Someone earning about $57,000, I think, is about $800 a year.
Okay.
And the maximum it gets to $1,000 if you earn over $79,000. And so, that's I've got to say, if you're earning $70,000 to $80,000 even in New Zealand, you don't feel rich in this country at the moment. I appreciate it's not a massive amount of money, but what it is a principle to say, hey, listen, when inflation's actually been eating away and pushing you into higher tax brackets, we should just very simply reset those tax thresholds. That's what this is about.
Not particularly clear for those high earners who are presumably very important voters for you. I just want to move on to Three Waters, though. There has been new recommendations out from a working group this morning that shares would be allocated to councils, but also local iwi representatives. There would actually be a 50-50 split. Do you think that this is a fairer system?
Well, it's certainly what we've been talking about, which is how do you keep the assets in local control? That's been the central, problem with the proposal from the government. The government's now got 3 working groups, a lot of its friends on it. So it'll be very interesting to see what they all ultimately come back with. But councils have been proposing these sorts of ideas since back in August, September. And all we've been saying to government is listen to local people on the ground closest to it to make the decision. The scale benefits, the costs are unrealistic. There's lots of cross-subsidisation, but the biggest issue has been, local residents have paid for these assets over 30 years and they don't have any control over them.
Just quickly before we go, there was no mention in your State of the Nation speech about Māori, but I know since you've given an interview to Te Ao Māori News and you've said that a number of high-calibre Māori have reached out to you over the summer about wanting to become MPs. Now, Twitterverse is quite curious as to what you mean by high-calibre Māoris.
What I mean is high-calibre people across New Zealand have been reaching out to us wanting to become candidates. I think we had 275 people actually express and start on a program called National 101 to explore whether they wanted to be a candidate. It's just a good sign. It means that we've had good people and high caliber people across the whole of the country from all communities wanting to be part of, exploring wanting to be part of the National Party. So I'm really excited by that because, as I said to you before, we want to be a national party. We've got to get to all communities. And if we've got really great talent wanting to join us or considering joining us, that's a really good thing.
So you'd use high caliber and low caliber to describe anybody that had been getting in touch?
What I meant was high quality talent, talented people who want to join the National Party or have been interested in exploring the National Party. That's a really good thing, and we've had a lot of interest over summer.
National Leader Christopher Luxon, take care. Hope you are testing negative soon. Thanks for your time.